A few questions for the train nerds out there. What is this livery called? That's right, London North Eastern Railway Apple Green. What is this livery called? Indeed, British Railways Express Passenger Blue. But what is this livery called? Oh, what was that? Did you say British Railways Brunswick Green? Wrong. This colour is actually known as deep bronze green. Like with many things railway related, it was the modelers which completely muddled the waters in regards to the naming of liveries. A prominent magazine at the time got the colour wrong and just assumed it was the same as the ex-Great Western Railway livery. This mistake has such a stranglehold on current railway enthusiasm that many books, documentaries and websites fail to mention that this BR locomotive livery is actually the same as the one carried by Land Rovers. Not the same livery carried by Rovers. But why did so many locomotives regress from their lively, bright colours to something as, well, drab as this? There's a long and a short version of the reason why. The short version is that the green was simply less intensive to maintain. The long version is a bit more complicated. When British Railways was formed in 1948, the newly formed railway executives wanted to give their stock, inherited from the Great Western Railway, the Southern Railway, the London, Midland and Scottish Railway and the LNER, one identity. The companies had enjoyed so much independence that they all strived for a different image. The Great Western, for instance, tried to keep everything uniform. Other than a few locomotives painted light green or even maroon, the most identifying feature of their railways were dark green locomotives hauling brown and cream-coloured carriages. Meanwhile, the London North Eastern Railway had most of their engines painted black, with liveries becoming brighter and brighter according to the prestige associated with the train the locomotive in question had to haul. If you were going London to York, you got a bright green locomotive, but if you went London to Newcastle, the locomotive was white. Which, when speaking in colours, is technically the brightest colour. A trend for the railway executive was to give their newly inherited locomotives liveries which had their origins before even World War I. Most popular was the London and North Western Railway livery, a scheme known as Blackberry Black. It was black, lined out in red, cream and grey. Sometimes the grey is depicted as white. Where more glamour was needed, they tended to just stick the Blackberry Black pattern of lining to liveries similar to those carried by the Big Four railway companies which amalgamated into British Railways. Most famously, this led to the LMS Jubilees and Southern Railway Lord Nelsons in a similar shade of green to the LNER's locomotives. However, the most famous early nationalisation livery is no doubt a colour often dubbed experimental violet. Said to be reminiscent of the old Great Eastern Railway's ultramarine, too much red in the mix resulted in a sort of purpley blue colour, lined out in the same LNWR style as the other liveries, of course, at the behest of British Railway's effective Chief Mechanical Engineer, Robert Riddles. It may come to no surprise to you that Riddles had cut his teeth at the LNWR works at Crewe, so his loyalty to their practices, be they livery or otherwise, is understandable. Spring 1949 saw all experimentalism swept away in favour of standardisation. The apple green on passenger locomotives was apparently rather garish. Brian Haresnape's Railway Liveries, the book I'm using for much of my research for this video, calls the green sickly. Whilst Riddles would have preferred all engines black for ease of maintenance, the executive wanted colours. For passenger locos, this meant a colour which was easy to touch up should it get dirty or damage, but equally appealing to look at. The choice fell on a shade of green a few hues darker than Great Western green, being more of a typical dark green as opposed to the Great Western's olive green. Listen, I have not studied colour theory, I left art school after a month. What was kept from the GWR was their style of lining, a black band with orange stripes on either side of it. The colours were the same, but the pattern simplified. While secondary and freight locos remained black, unlined in the case of freight locos, the top express machines were turned out in a colour scheme similar to the Caledonian Railway's blue. Whilst it looked downright gorgeous when freshly applied, in surface it proved a pain. The colour turned a near black in working conditions, and if the paint got damaged and was retouched, an obvious patch would show due to the fresh paint not having darkened yet. Modern methods of paint making would have rendered such an issue non-existent, but in the 40s and 50s the livery might as well be called black and blue. The inconsistency of the blue eventually led to the few locos which carried BR Express blue to be repainted the same shade of dark green as the secondary Express locos, starting in around 1952. In 1956, politics changed again. The separate regions were given back some autonomy, most seizing the opportunity to return to their pre-nationalisation colours. The Western region turned even small freight locos out in full-line green, the Scottish region gave its locos blue number plates, the Midland region painted some of its Stop Express locos red, and the Northeastern region gave its station pilots old pre-1923 grouping liveries. Southern region locomotives were fine for the most part, but what persisted throughout was the Land Rover Green. Partly because of its aesthetic, dark green is still more colourful than black, but it was also easy to reapply should a locomotive come back to its depot in an absolute state. Now in fairness, I should disclose that the way the paints were applied to the locomotives meant that if a paint shop foreman couldn't quite mix the paints to the exact specification given by BR, then the locos would wear that variation on the standard BR green. It is completely possible that GWR depots just said salt this and kept their old colours. BR green is not Great Western green, nor is it really pleasing to the eye if recent discussion among enthusiasts is anything to go by. But if it consoles just one of you, Robert Riddles preferred his locomotives any other colour, so long as it was black.